Good evening. Welcome to this Global Exchange webcast. We're coming to you tonight from a number of different places. My name is Ted Lewis, and I'm in San Francisco, California. And before we get started, I just want to explain what it is that we're looking to do tonight. Those of you who are on the Zoom platform with us, those of you who are watching on Facebook, we welcome your questions. And what we're talking about tonight is the coronavirus epidemic and how it is affecting immigrant communities. We've been hearing for the last weeks nonstop about coronavirus, and many of us have been directly affected, are quarantined. Probably a lot of those who are listening tonight are in similar circumstances. You're living under a quarantine. We hope that people around you are well, but we're all facing the possibility that we could get sick and that those that we love and those who are close to us could also get sick. It's a very difficult situation. We are looking at an economic situation in the United States where just in the last week, there have been 3.3 million people applying for unemployment benefits for the first time. This is a record. The economy is plummeting, and this is matched by effects all around the world. We've been hearing horror stories from different places, particularly Iran, Italy, and some of the places where the virus has hit so hard. And tonight, people are with us from New York City, where the pandemic is striking the United States in unpredictable and terrible ways. Within this difficult and really society changing moment that we're living through, some of the people who are hardest hit are the international workers among us, those who work in many industries and who are unprotected in the ways that so many workers and others in the United States are. There have been huge bills, as we know, that have reached near completion in Congress that are going to be channeling a lot of money to workers, people who are unemployed, businesses throughout the country. But those who are least protected are the ones who've always been least protected, yet they're doing many of the vital jobs right now that are being carried out despite the pandemic. So that's what we want to talk about. We welcome your questions. You know, Global Exchange has been doing these kind of Zoom webinars. We're glad you can join us here on Zoom for quite a while. It's become extremely popular now, but in addition to this webinar, we're going to be doing a lot of different presentations over the next week. The series that we've been doing on relations between Mexico and the United States, topics that we've been covering for a long time, like climate change, ending the drug war, stopping the war with Iran, and above all, immigration. Those are things that we're going to be carrying on. Tonight's webinar is part of that. This is part of how we do a civic mobilization during a lockdown. So I'd like to turn it over to Marco Castillo in New York City to introduce our panelists tonight. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Ted. As you just mentioned, we want to welcome everyone and, of course, use this difficult situation to explore and expand new forms of solidarity between us and across borders. The opportunity of having you all together here, it's really important for us, and hopefully will be the beginning of a new community across borders that come together through the use of technology to reflect and act. We have 27 participants right now from all over the world here on Zoom, and we have hundreds of viewers on Facebook right now. We want to welcome everyone and welcome your questions. And tonight we have the privilege of having with us two amazing organizer, two amazing advocates, and let me introduce you to them. here with us is Jorge Torres. Jorge Torres is the East Coordinator for Endelon. Endelon, the National Day Labor Organizing Network. Jorge Torres was born in Quito, Ecuador, where he had his first experience seeing inequality, particularly in the way indigenous people were treated. And then in New Haven, Connecticut, where I met Jorge for the first time, Jorge started to get involved with Unidad Latina en Acción, a community organization that works against wage theft. And then since then, for over 10 years, Jorge has personally worked with families in deportation proceedings. And also Jorge has done a lot of community radio, makes films and documentaries. And it's quite an honor to have you here, Jorge, with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also the privilege of having with us Becky Smith, who is a licensed master social worker from the University of Chicago, based in New York City. She works alongside legal advocates to provide holistic services to undocumented communities in the Bronx. Becky Smith has a large experience working with again, as I said, with legal services organizations. She administers trainings for organizations across New York on the topic of providing trauma-informed interviewing for asylum cases, and have testified in front of New York City Council regarding mental health services for immigrants in New York. She holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Chicago. And also Becky has extended experience working in detention centers, particularly south of the United States, where she voluntarily worked for 3 consecutive years. Happy to hear from them. Hand it over to you, Teth, please, with the questions.
Thank you very much. Jorge Torres, it's great to have you tonight. And we just want to start asking you how you're doing and how your organization is doing. You know, tell us where you are, how your life's been affected, and then let's talk about the people that you work with. Go ahead.
That was, it was frozen for a little bit.
Okay. You're fine now.
Okay, so thank you so much for the invitation to Global Exchange. Thank you so much for having me tonight. The National Day Labor Organizing Network, a organization that is a network that we support more than 56 worker centers across the state and across the country. We support and we advocate for day laborers, low wages workers, and workers that are part of this economic crisis right now. We believe that how this administration has put us in this situation, what it is that some of the day laborers and worker center has been left out and forgiven of all this inconvenience that is happening. Day laborers are workers that are in the corner asking for jobs or waiting for someone to pick them up and take them to work. And some of this worker center has built from the sacrifice and the organize of workers in the corners. So what it has been being effective. The weight of the some of them are not and that more of them are most of the 95% are undocumented. They are the more vulnerable in this time nowadays. They are not going to be able to, you know, the work has been low for them to go to work. And we've been seeing a lot in across the country how the impact of the lack of equipment for them to keep working in this crisis, the lack of free health for everyone. So we've been seeing all this type of inconvenience for our community. As a matter of fact, we were just having this conversation on the national level this morning, and we've been hearing that a lot of worker centers are probably in danger to close. We had identified that it is the time to work together. it is the time to start thinking about how are we going to protect our workers, how are we going to protect the people that is being left out of this economic crisis. And I could keep going. I don't know if you have.
Well, Jorge, let's just the workers that you work with and represent are like you say, folks who we often see on the corner soliciting work. They work by the day, and that kind of work is, as you suggested, almost evaporated under the current circumstances. Or are people still finding, people that want to hire them?
No. It has been the risk is that they're gonna go to work without protection, number one, and two, they don't have a job. Like the people that were hire them or pick them up to go to work, it has been low.
They're not coming by because
they're not coming back. And then the other thing is that they are not qualifying for all the different things that they can qualify to get some food or to pay their rent. So the more the things that are so dangerous right now is what is that they're gonna do when this is gonna get worse, because we know that it's just gonna get worse, it's not gonna get better. So we believe that it is important for us as Endelon to keep thinking about what is that we're going to do with workers that have been left off or of any economic advance or any economic relief that they can have.
Okay. And it sounds like you're talking with your people around the country about that. Let's hear a little bit from Becky Smith. Becky, your organization supports people who are in New York City, who are also migrants of many different stripes, but many of the people that you work with are undocumented migrants. Can you talk about what kind of programs people are both being included in and being excluded from in these moments of great change and turbulence?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ted. So I work primarily with low and no income New Yorkers who mostly come from Central America, Mexico, West Africa, in the Bronx. And most of those folks are also crime victims. So they've experienced a crime, whether it's been in their country of origin or whether it's been here in the States. And over the past few weeks, what we've been seeing with everything that's been going on with the coronavirus is that, kind of as Jorge mentioned, there has just been an immense surge in need. So we've seen, entire families, lose their jobs and be laid off. Many of who are undocumented workers and who are not going to qualify for unemployment benefits. We're talking about families who live often paycheck to paycheck, and so when someone loses their job in a moment, that can really impact a family's ability to put food on the table. So we're talking about families that are extremely in extremely precarious situations financially, and like like Jorge mentioned as well, a lot of these families don't qualify for federal assistance programs like SNAP, cash assistance, unemployment benefits, as we mentioned. And so, even if there's a family that has, for example, one US citizen child, they're only going to qualify for $192 a month, essentially, for those SNAP benefits. And even if a family does qualify for those services, there's also just a huge amount of fear in communities right now around public charge, and just in terms of accessing benefits or services in general. So I've spoken to families who are afraid to access services such as food pantries because they're afraid that that's going to in some way make them eligible, make them qualify as a public charge. So these are, huge problems.
Can you just say a little bit for folks who might not be completely familiar with that term, public charge? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so that was just kind of a ridiculous racist determination that the government decided to put on onto families, individuals who potentially might qualify to adjust their status in the future. The government is now saying I mean, public charge has been around for a long time, but they're kind of just putting it in the spotlight more now and enacting. And so what they're saying is that, for example, families and individuals who might qualify to adjust their immigration status, that adjustment might be impacted by how much of a public charge they are to the government. So if you access Medicaid, or if you access SNAP benefits, or if you access any kind of government assistance, that's kind of signaling to the government, that you're going to be a burden to them by becoming a green card holder, for example.
So this is effectively a means to keep poor people farther away from being able to apply for their rights under the immigration system, and it's impacting people particularly hard now because there's tremendous fear of it. Is it okay, and are people seeking medical help when they are having problems, or is that also something that the fear that you mentioned is stopping people from doing?
I mean, this is complicated, and everything around public charges, just because it really depends, so much on the particular, status of the individual and the family, et cetera. But USCIS has released guidelines saying that they're not going to penalize individuals for accessing testing for COVID, or potentially when a vaccine is released, so treatment. So that's what they're saying right now. They are technically saying, they're trying to encourage people, including undocumented folks, to access medical care during this time, and saying that they're not going to be considered a public charge. But we really don't know, because what we've seen from this government is that we really just can't. We can never count on the things that are actually told to us. And so, I think that the most important thing to keep in mind is that the fear and the propaganda that has been kind of started around public charge. It exists within communities, and it's very difficult to get information out to folks, to say, yes, don't go off your Medicaid plan, don't disenroll in SNAP. It's not going to actually impact you at all. It's your children who are the US citizens. So it's, really important that we're getting this information out to families right now, because now more than ever, we need to make sure that folks are receiving benefits as, if they can.
We've asked people to please send in questions if you have them, and we have one already from KL, who asks, "Are worker centers city funded?" You can answer this question, Jorge, but there's a little bit more. Will there be any relief from the small business services, as mentioned by the Small Business Services Commissioner? To clarify the above question, I'm asking about the sustainability of the worker centers only, not the people, not the individuals. Are the centers going to be helped out?
So as now, only New York City and some other states, they receive some funding from the governor, or from the New York City, for example, from the local, but some of them are not. Like it varies. It's some foundations and some city funding money. If that answers the questions about funding.
Yeah, I want to ask also both of you, because both of you have experience working at detention centers. I understand, Jorge, that you have these days also been involved in demanding that families and individuals are released from detention centers in this because of this crisis. What's happening in detention centers? Why do people should be released from detention right now?
So, I mean, this is I will say that is an inhumane and racist crisis that we are going through. Yesterday night, I mean, we've been working 2 weeks, not stopping on how can we protect day laborers, but also as I mentioned, it was 5 of our national demands, and one of them, and the first one is to stop ICE and CBP enforcement. And what this means is that in detentions is the biggest risk. Everything is getting closed. Everything is getting protected by a spread the COVID-19. And in detention centers, we just don't have, they haven't have not even soap to wash their hands, not even hand sanitizers to disinfect or to prevent any spread of the COVID-19. So we've been hearing that this was on and on and on. And also we've been receiving phone calls from families that had the loved ones inside and the detention centers. And they were telling us that it was people getting arrested on the border and then transferring, or some of them even in New York City, which the spread was increasing tremendously. And they were put in detention centers like Hudson or Essex in New Jersey. So after that, and they haven't done nothing. They haven't given no way to prevent, and they haven't done nothing at all. So then two doctors, lawyers, and security guards were test positive with COVID-19, and they haven't done nothing either. So we are demanding the release and the close of this detention center, just as how any other businesses actually closing in New Jersey. Some of the inmates start a hunger strike in Essex detention center, for example. And then it was that we were able to kind of spread the word. And now the 4 detention centers are in New Jersey are with people that is doing hunger strikes, demanding the release and demanding that one inmate yesterday was test positive with COVID-19 in the ICE side of the detention center. And what they have done is just isolate them. They release 1,000 inmates from the criminal justice side of it, but now we haven't heard anything from what is going to be the plan action and the plan B on dismantle this detention centers, and also dismantle these camps that are only hurting our people, and now they are putting people on risk and families on risk as well.
Thank you, Jorge. What's your experience, Becky, in detention centers? Do they have the same conditions in the southern border?
Yeah, so my experience was working in family detentions along the southern border. And so it's pretty gross to say this, but the conditions in family detention centers generally tend to be a little bit better than in centers that house individuals, and especially male detention centers. But for the most part, I mean, everything that Jorge just mentioned is 100% true across the board, and that we're talking about families who are living in very close quarters, in already extremely oppressive conditions, but they have they have completely inadequate access to any kind of testing, medical care. I won't even start to talk about like the mental health resources that are available. And so obviously I think we can all, we can all come to the conclusion that, the idea of COVID spreading in detention centers is it happens extremely quickly. And I think it's just a matter of time before we start hearing more cases as the one that Jorge mentioned that just came out yesterday, the first person who tested positive. But in general, I think that we should be releasing all folks from detention, period, and especially right now, especially considering how many folks we have detained and imprisoned in general who are immunocompromised, are HIV positive, are going to be very, very negatively impacted by the spread of a virus like COVID-19.
Thank you. We just started, we just shared on social media and here on Zoom the actual campaign from End the Lawn to demand protection for workers and migrants in the face of coronavirus. Please check that and join.
So just to add to that, Mark, if I mind, Marco, if you mind. So like I said, right, so the first one is stop ICE and CBP operations at all levels. The second one, like as I mentioned, was dismantle the camps, the concentration camps. It is time for closing. This is not the first time that we've been hearing, and the conditions inside of the detention centers are totally inhumane. It's always, and we keep inputting profit over families, and we should not allow that in our country. And the third one is medicine for all. We believe that it is time to have an emergency plans of healthcare, right? Testing and vaccines for everyone. You know, especially here in New Jersey. I mean, just the people that have money, the people that is rich, is actually getting access to have this test. Workers' protections. In a lot of moments, personal protection equipments are not, you know, workers, for example, in Hurricane Sandy and Katrina, workers that were part of this reconstruction and emergency plans, they just go there without protection, without personal protection equipment. So we believe that it's time, and the ones that are affected right now, for example, restaurant workers, right, or people that does delivery, nurses, they don't have enough personal protection equipment. So we believe that it is important for us to have that. And the last but not least is relief for our people. We believe that it's important for ourselves to be creative, to start some GoFundMe pages. We believe that it's important for us to save ourselves. And we said in Spanish, el pueblo salva al pueblo, and the people is only that is going to save us. So those are the 5 things that we are putting out there. We also put a fund that we are, you know, convinced that we are asking foundations to put money there. We asking donations to submit fund to create this fund that will relieve immediate relief to some of our day laborers and low wages workers as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jorge. I have a related question that comes from San Diego, from Rafa Lopez in San Diego, who sends greeting and says, what can we do to protect vulnerable immigrants with the COVID-19 epidemic, particularly the farm workers who feed America? Some of what you just said is probably relevant to that, but do either you or Becky have ideas specifically how we can protect farm workers? And I would extend that to the people who are working in the supply chains and in the warehouses and in many aspects of what are extremely vital services for the whole country.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we need to do is kind of recognize that, you know, the folks who are literally on the front lines of what's going on are undocumented communities across the country, and that we need to make sure that people are actually being paid adequately for the work that they're doing, and that they're being provided with the protection that, you know, that they need, that Jorge mentioned. And then we need to make sure that people are actually going to be receiving some of the aid that we're talking about, you know, the, you know, federal stimulus package that is leaving out, you know, millions of undocumented people who pay billions of dollars into taxes every, you know, who have paid billions of dollars into taxes. And we are essentially leaving out, you know, millions of workers by not allowing them to access that federal aid. And then I think that, you know, we should also be talking about, you know, larger strikes and things that we can do to support people, especially folks. I don't have a lot of experience working with farm workers, so I certainly can't speak to that.
I mean, I think what I will add to that is that it is time to start buying locally. It's time to recognize how important it is to have our farmers workers in this crisis. I think that is a lot of corporations in this country that has that is also able to migrate to other countries. And then when we talk about how the capital can migrate easily, but how we as a human beings, it's hard to migrate and freely. So I believe that it is time to recognize that. I think it's important to start thinking that, you know, there is workers out there that are doing this job and are taking this country to another level and build in this country. If we wouldn't have farmers workers right now, we wouldn't be able to have some food on our table. So I mean, I think just to add into that is here in New Jersey is a good nonprofit organization that is called CATA, that supports farmers workers, and in the south of New Jersey is a lot of fields, and they have been affected by this crisis as well. So we can pass some links through the WhatsApp to the chat, and we can post some links to the how we can support each individual. I think it has been creating, each individual organization, it has been creating funds, so we can, so that way we can support different industries in the worker side of it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's one other thing that we can do.
Thank you, Jorge. We are here. Global Exchange is hosting this webinar speaking about immigrant communities and COVID-19 risks and impacts. And we are talking with Jorge Torres, East Coordinator for the National Day Labor Organizing Network, and Becky Smith, licensed master social worker based here in New York and New Jersey. I wanted to ask you both, why is it, if people are asking us about farm workers, you were talking about people in detention, and we're talking about undocumented families. Seems like, so I guess my main question for you, Jorge, is who are the people that are in detention? Why are they in detention? Very quickly, for those of us who believe or have heard or are misinformed on the idea that people who are in detention right now are people that have had problems with the law.
So it was a recent study that just came out that around 35% of the has committed what is considered a crime under the law. I mean, driving with a tail light down is considered a criminal, and or driving without driver's license is considered a criminal crime in this country. So you know, it's people that has been there driving without driver's license, people that had you know, problems with driving with a tail light down. You know, it's many of the reasons, and it's all minors violations. And it was more than 75% of them that has been, at least in the detention centers of New Jersey, that has committed minor violations or misdemeanors, that, you know, the way that we call it, the way that we see it. So yeah, so it's these people that are there. I mean, our sisters and brothers, and the key thing and the key part of this is that there are more people of color that are in detention center, the people that is, you know, and you know, consider whites or Anglos. It is more people of color that has been detained for minor violations. We had a case last year, and I would like to share that if I can. It was a case from an African American that it was a resident for more than 18 years in this country. He was stopped by having 0.5 ounces of marijuana when he was in high school. After probably 10 or 11 years, he was arrested, and he was put in deportation procedures, and he was put in detention center for almost 6 months. With the family, he was in high school when that happened, and with the family and everything. So, you know, these are the kind of people that are our sisters and brothers that are detained, and that's why we're fighting, because is a racist system, is an inhumane system. And when you are detained, then you don't have access to free phone calls. You have to work inside for $3, $2 a day, 8 hours. And then the water, soap, or anything that you want to buy, it costs more than $5. So you have to work sometimes 2 days in order to buy something. So the conditions are incredible, inhumane, and you know, we it's just unbelievable what is happening, and now, even now, is even worse. You know, it's even worse. So they what we had here is that they were isolating in their own cells since last week. So I just want to put that in perspective for folks that are you know, join us. Sometimes we can even be at home and we want to just be outside. Imagine what it is to be in your own cell for 2 weeks or 1 week.
Thank you
And
very much.
no prospect that that's going to let up anytime soon. That's also what people are looking at. Yeah.
I mean, you know, we have a press conference tomorrow morning with families that has people inside of the detention centers, with families that ICE were targeting in Sunset Park, Bronx. Tomorrow morning we have that, and then around 5 o'clock we will more than 100 cars are gonna drive and beeping outside of the Bergen County detention center, where one inmate was already test positive with COVID-19, and ICE had says, you know, they haven't said nothing about it. And what is that they're going to do? You know, they've been closing business, they've been closing, you know, the highways and all these stops. And nobody has talked about what's going on in the detention centers.
Thank you, Jorge. So we have a couple of more questions as we are heading to the last part of this very special webcast. We want to thank everyone for being here. But let me ask something to both of you. Why and how is it that we are finding ourselves here in the face of a crisis like this one, in the face of a health crisis, and having to find ourselves here speaking about families, about children, youth, and farm workers that are being at risk, the first ones that are being at risk of getting sick, the first ones who will probably find more trouble having access to a hospital, and probably no access to any kind of program, federal program, any kind of benefit. Why is it that this is happening in America? What is it? What's the problem behind the crisis that we are seeing here? Not only the health, but what is the problem with our system? How is it that how about these families that have no access to benefits and they're being criminalized?
Becky, if you...
How
Yeah.
can this be possible? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very big question. But I think that, you know, part of the problem, you know, stems from the fact that the United States does not, if we're talking specifically about immigrant communities, the United States does not see immigrant communities, immigrant families, undocumented individuals as human beings and as people who contribute to, you know, whatever American dream that exists. And the fact is that, you know, we do not allow communities and individuals to access the same benefits, the same services that, you know, US citizens do. And it's, you know, I think we're going to see the impacts of that over the next few weeks. You know, I've had families call me over the last few days saying that they don't have any food to put on their table, that they're afraid to, you know, they're afraid to go to the hospital because of what might happen, you know, in terms of ICE raids in the Bronx. They're afraid to get tested because they feel like they might be public charge. Families are under such immense stress and anxiety right now, just because of just the culmination, I think, of just, you know, so many years of you know, racist, xenophobic policies that have just been perpetuated more by the Trump administration. And so, you know, it's hard to talk about, you know, the root of these problems and how we might see them kind of spiraling out of control. But I think, you know, it's just, we're going to see things getting, you know, much worse, especially as we see folks who are, you know, already isolated, have to, you know, be physically isolated to their homes, disconnected more from community, and not connected, especially with accurate information in terms of what's going on.
Thank you.
To me, it's an open it's an open eye to everybody that lives in this country. I think that it is also not just about what's going on politically. It's also about what's going on with the mother nature. What is the mother nature telling us? We live in a country that we have to be speeding all the time. How many times are we really stopping and start being kind of, I'm only thinking about me and not thinking about others. It is a racist administration that doesn't care about people dying. It is a racist administration. Is white supremacies. It is. They just think about. I mean, and the administration is just thinking about the re-election. I think it's also a political game that is going on right now. And it's all this comparison theories that I don't want to go into it, but I totally believe that there is something behind this. Yeah, I totally believe that there is more than just people are getting infected with a virus. And I feel like in terms of politically, it is an open eye, like I said, for everyone, that we need free care, that we need to see each other as a human beings, and start seeing each other's with colors and genders. I also think that it's time for this country to start being greedy to others, for communities to get together. I also feel that it's time for ourselves, to start thinking about what is that we going, and what is that we want as community. I think that it is also give me a lot of hope and among each other. I have seen there is a lot of solidarity in among us. I had seen that is a lot of people that is working and putting and working and putting themselves as someone that can be available and support any community out there, any people from the community that are suffering. So I have a lot of hope for the movement as well. But yeah, I totally believe that it's a political game, and it is that we have to defeat, that we cannot allow to have any more a white supremacist president. And I hope it is about time for us to open our eyes.
Well, thank you for that, Jorge. And that maybe that brings us around to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is that we have to do a civic mobilization in ways that we've never done before. We need to do it, in ways that can change, get us out of having a racist administration, start to really educate people about these issues. That's why we're having this webinar. We're so glad that that the two of you could join us. This is by no means the last. You've been with us before on these webcasts. I don't know if there's anything more that you would like to tell our viewers, Becky, before we end up the program, or Marco, if you have any additional questions. I know that, thank you, Jorge, you've been answering the questions that some people had in the chat. And I think we've taken care of that. And if anybody else online would like to ask another question before we close, this is your last chance.
In the meantime, I just want to ask, whenever, if you want, what can people do? What can people do to join your fight, and what else can people do to support the current efforts in New York or New Jersey or nationally?
Endelon has put out a immigrant worker safety net fund that will actually give support and immediate support to day laborers or migrants or low wage workers in general, that will support immediately, in financially, and the way that we see it is that this is the time where workers are going to need to feed their families immediately, right? Because it's not just about what's going on here. It's also that a lot of workers, or a lot of members of our community send money back to our own country, so that's going to be also affected. And what's going to happen with that side of it that sometimes we forget about, transnationally, how are we going to solve that part as well? So we put a immigrant worker safety net fund. I can share the link. We are getting we are fundraising so we can release the money immediately to worker centers that are committed to give this money to workers that are, that has family affected with COVID-19, that has workers that are more than 60 years and old. So we have all this safety money that we're trying to think about how are we going to distribute it with all worker centers that are going to be affected in this crisis. So these are the types of stuff that we believe that it can solve immediately. As I said, one of our demands is the community will save the community now. We're not waiting for the federal government to do nothing for us. And we will put that link on the Facebook Live and all the social media platforms. And that's one thing. I mean, the second thing is that in terms of the detention centers, more than 52,000 migrants are in these detention centers across the country. So I'm pretty sure that is always something going on. Demand ICE and start sharing petitions about that they should be relieved and they should be released, and these detention centers should be closed to, and on the national level, and dismantle this racist system as well.
Thank you.
So I think a few things that are really important in terms of what's going on right now in New York and how we can protect folks. The first thing is that there is currently a moratorium on evictions happening right now, which means that folks won't actually be necessarily evicted from their homes while this is going on. But the problem with that, what we're finding from talking to a lot of families is that especially with immigrant tenants, there's a lot of fear for folks not being able to pay the rent, because there's a lot of intimidation and pressure happening from landlords who are taking advantage of the fact that they know that they have undocumented tenants. And so what we're asking for beyond an eviction moratorium is that New York enacts rent freezes so that people don't have to worry about paying the rent over the next couple of months. Because we are seeing that families not only can't pay the rent, but they can't put food on the table, they can't afford medication. They're having to choose between, formula and, milk for their other children. And so I think the rent issue is huge. And there are lots of organizations that are really pushing for legislation right now to try and get some kind of moratorium on rent as well. I think the next thing is that we need to also be pushing for some kind of cash assistance for all individuals, potentially folks, who, file their taxes, with an ITIN, though I think it should be, far greater than that, because there are a lot of families, a lot of immigrant families who don't necessarily file their taxes and should also be receiving cash assistance. And so that's really important. Just to add on to what Jorge was saying, I think we also need to be putting pressure to make sure that all incarcerated individuals and individuals who are stuck in detention centers right now are released, and that ICE not only put a stop to immigration enforcement that's going on right now, because they've said with COVID that they're only going to be targeting individuals who, have criminal records and things like that. But again, we're talking about people who were driving with a taillight burnt out or driving without a license or, have some, small infractions. And so that really needs to stop, especially right now. So I think there's things that people can do, and we can definitely send around some of those petitions in terms of the rent moratoriums. I think we're going to have to get creative over the next few months. And what that is looking like, what we're seeing at least, is a lot of mutual aid networks. And so, are you able to work from home for the next few months? Donate your Metro card, donate your unlimited Metro card to folks who need it. Are you still getting paid? Help put groceries on the tables of families. There are lots of folks that are kind of working on a grassroots network to try and provide these emergency services to families, specifically undocumented families who aren't going to have access to the emergency relief, relief funds that we're talking about.
We have a question, Ted.
Yeah, we have a question that came in at the very last, and I think Jorge, you answered this question to a large extent, and maybe we can give this person a link. But the question is, I know the federal government is planning to give out money to citizens to supplement lost income. Do you know of any campaigns that are bringing folks together to use that money to give back to undocumented families, especially since there are such limited relief options available? If you have that link, Jorge, I think this is it's a good response to that question. But if you could give a very quick response to that, please.
So yeah, I think the way to do it will be to donate the money that you receive. That will be. I haven't heard anything. Actually, it's a good a way to see it. I think it's we are rethinking as well how we're gonna do that, and we are going to start putting out there how we're gonna respond to what's going on. Workers are excluded, undocumented are excluded, TPS recipients are excluded. TPS, a temporary protection program that some of the Central Americans receive, some of the countries from Central Americans and other countries also receive. So we are excluded. And the way that they seeing this, that if you pay taxes, they going to reimburse you. I think it's like $1,200 or something like that. But so we have, like, most of the undocumented, I was undocumented for almost 9 years, and I used to have the TIN number, and that's something that you have so you can pay taxes. But that's in this case, you're not allowed to get the money. As I keep saying, is some, it's racism right there. And yeah, we don't know. I don't know anything like that, but I think it's a good option to keep donated to the Immigrant Workers Safe Net Fund. That's the name of it. I'm gonna send the link, and then you all can share with your community.
And I see you put the link here in the chat of the Zoom call. I would like to underline what Becky said as well, that it's very important for all of us to lobby at the local and state level for the kind of rent freezes and other mechanisms that affect everybody. Renters are generally among the people who are living most day to day in our society. So having those kind of freezes, moratoriums on payment, all those kind of things are going to be critical in these months, and we've got to work for them wherever we are. So I want to thank everybody for tonight. We'll be in touch. Becky Smith, Jorge Torres, Marco Castillo. Thank you all. I'm Ted Lewis for Global Exchange, and we wish you all a very good night. Stay safe, stay healthy, take care of the people around you, and let's spread the love around. Everybody needs it these days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Para nuestros amigos en español, pronto vamos a tener una versión en español de este programa, nuestros amigos de Rompeviento y quienes nos miran en las redes sociales. Muchas gracias.
Have a good night.